I'm Will. Y'all know me because I'm in y'all's class. But so I've been sober for 4 years, and I want to say what September, October, November, 4 years, 3 months. And yeah, I got sober when I was 17. I started drinking alcohol when I was 13. I started smoking marijuana when I was 15, and I started using cocaine when I was 17. Um, and it was more like 16 and a half, if you want to say that. But um, yeah, basically when I was in my addiction, it was my life revolved around alcohol and drugs. It was all about how can I get my next fix? How can I, and with complete disregard to what I was doing to my family, what I was doing with my friends, my true friends. I did have friends, if you could call them that. It was more like fair weather friends. Like, hey, Will, you got drugs and alcohol? And I was like, yeah. And they were like, cool, let's be friends. They're probably in the same boat that I was in. And so, as I went through that, it was just a lot of despair and a lot of misery. And looking back on it, like, I thought I was having such a great time, but in reality, it was like I was hiding so many things that I didn't want people to know about me. I was hiding like this just out of placeness that I felt. And so going into recovery was like the best thing for me. I started feeling my emotions again. I started understanding like who I was. I found an identity outside of drugs and alcohol. And yeah, if we look at like how my family went, what led me to being in recovery was like me reaching out for help. That was the initial step, was like, hey, mom. I remember it clear as day. Like, I was in her car right before a water polo tournament, like my end of my junior year in high school. And I looked at her and said, I I don't know what I'm doing. I need help. And that like triggered a series of events that eventually led me to being with a therapist. And this therapist, he like gave me some psychoeducation about drugs and alcohol. And actually, so my mom was seeing a therapist at the time, and her therapist recommended this therapist for us. And so they got together, and my whole family went, or rather, me, my mom, and dad went, and we talked to him. And for about 3 months, I did that, and I didn't improve at all because I didn't want to. I was still using. I was going to therapy sessions high, and so the very last session I had with him, and I remember this is like another turning point for me, was he recommended this thing called Teen and Family Services. It's basically a preventative program for teens with destructive behaviors, but mostly deals with drugs and alcohol addiction. And so we did that, and yeah, so I entered that like August 1st, 2014, and I've been sober ever since. My relationship with my mother improved, my relationship with my father improved, my relationship with both my sisters improved. Everything just improved. My dad worked in Al-Anon program for about 6 months, and recognized like a bunch of things that he had been doing in my addiction, and like during those 6 months where he was, enabling me and wanting me to get better, but also doing it at the expense of himself.
Did all of your family go to Al-Anon?
No, so my mom raised us with Al-Anon principles, but she didn't know they were Al-Anon principles. She was really big into independence and like letting us make our own choices, letting us experience our own consequences, not really saving us from anything. And so during my addiction, my mom really wasn't that big of an enabler. I don't know, the word enabler bothers me, but that's the easiest word to use in this context. And so, boundaries were, I didn't have a curfew. I just had to let them know where I was at midnight and if I was coming home. And then once they started like figuring out like, oh, Will is, using drugs and alcohol, my boundaries got a lot more rigid. The rules in the house were a lot more rigid. And it was like I wasn't allowed to go out anymore. I was pretty much in my room alone, and like I had to come downstairs for family dinner, and I wasn't allowed to scarf my food down and go back upstairs. I had to like sit at the family dinner for an allotted period of time. And yeah, I wasn't, no drinking and driving, which I always broke. Just all, yeah, and like some of these are standard boundaries that parents have with their kids, and some are more rigid. And then, you look at the outside and like no one really knew. It was only people in my family that knew. We kept it under wraps. Even when I got sober for like 6 months, we kept it under wraps that I was an alcoholic. But now, like, everyone knows. Like, I'm open about it. My parents are open about it. Like, I think the more anonymous I am, the more stereotyped, or what's the word? I'll think of it later, probably. But the more stereotyped or stigmatized, the more stigmatized I can be. And so if I'm, out in the open talking about it and actually like allowing my family to talk about it, then like people can't stigmatize me. If you want to look at the power dynamic in the family when the addiction is present, like the addiction definitely held the power in our family. You could ask any one of my close family members and they would say that Will's addiction was the most powerful thing in our family at the time. Not Will being an addict, but the addiction itself, the disease. My parents were losing sleep over it. My sisters were worried about it. My sisters were reporting to my parents about it. Like every conversation they seemed to have was surrounding like this addiction. Any conversation or interaction I had with my parents or my sisters was about the addiction. That was all for those 2.5 years that we talked about, was like, hey, Will, don't do drugs. Hey, Mom, I'm going to do drugs. And there's, I disrespected my parents. There's a lot of shame behind that, but I've worked through that. And I still today, like I have to work towards, recovery. I'm still working towards recovery every single day. And so like, what does that look like in my family today? It's great. I called my mom earlier today and asked her how to cook a 25-pound turkey in the microwave. She wasn't very amused, but it's like, and my dad and I have a more like friendly relationship where we're not arguing all the time, and it's not necessarily father and son, because I think we're going past that, but more of like friends. Like I can call him and talk to him about girls again, and call him and talk to him about sports or anything like that. Ask him how his day's going. Like when I was in my addiction, there's no way I would have asked my dad or my mom or my sisters how their day was going. Like I didn't care about that. But systemically, if looking at it like that, it's, boundaries are more flexible. Rules are less rigid. The power is, there's a hierarchy in our family again. Like our parents hold the power for the decisions for the family. Like given I'm 22 years old, my sisters are 24, 25, 26. I only have 2 sisters, so one's 25, one's 26. But like they don't, like, I don't know, I guess it's a standard family progression. Like they launched us, they watched us grow, and now we're like moving into that point of our lives where this whole power dynamic shifts. And so yeah.
Would you say that recovery was a family process?
Absolutely. So on Tuesdays there was a family group which me and my mom and dad attended because both my sisters were at college at that point. But there was a family letter where I wrote a letter to my family, and my mom, dad, and sisters wrote an individual letter to me, or they each wrote an individual letter to me. And that was probably one of the most powerful experiences I've had in my recovery, was actually seeing how I hurt them and impacted them. Overall, like, I talked to my family about recovery. And you could argue that like recovery now has the power in our relationships. And it doesn't dominate, but like I do talk to my parents about recovery a lot, and I talk to my sisters about recovery a lot. I talk to my friends, I talk to the cohort, like, I'm always down to talk about recovery, just because I know the impact it's had in my life and so many other people's. If, as a family, like we did recover together, and there's evidence to support that, I was digging through my dad's stuff a while ago because I was looking for a notebook, and I pulled out like some of his gratitude lists. Like stumbled across them, wasn't like actively searching for them, but I didn't read through them because like that's his personal stuff. But like just the fact that like he's doing that on a daily basis, and my mom is, still going to therapy, but like also working through stuff that she needed to work through, and my sisters are asking me about my recovery and how they can help, or how they can, do what they need to do. And my sister's husband, who's been in the family for like 9 years now, they didn't get married until like a year and a half ago, but he's, he was there through it all too. And like he asked me about it, and so they are interested and they want to know more, and they always ask like me what they can do. Like I feel like I've kind of become this, not necessarily spiritual leader, but definitely more outspoken about my spirituality and about how like my higher power has saved me. And so they always ask me questions about it, which I think is really, really cool. And so I think that like as a family we did recover together.